wrote Genesis, writes this. He says, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come, now let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say that a fierce animal has devoured them, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to him, shed no blood. Cast him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, so that Reuben might rescue him out of their hands and restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it. And then they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing gall and balm and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. And when Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. Thanks, guys. Last week we began a short little study on the book of Joseph. Joseph is one of those characters in the scripture in which we see the hand of God being used greatly to help him throughout his life. There are some people who believe that Joseph was a model of Jesus in the fact that there's very little of sin that's reported of him, although I kind of wonder about that kind of an assertion. But somehow he seemed to come out of some real dire circumstances in his life and do well. I remember sitting around a table with some people who were involved in ministries to people with addictions, and we were, I think there were a couple of men there from one of the addiction programs as well. We had just finished dinner and sat around talking to each other, and somebody asked a question that seemed fairly obvious. He said, is there a program? Is there a Bible study? Is there a book out there that can help somebody through addiction, help somebody to change their lives? And a few people came up with some suggestions, kind of thing. But I remember looking at them and saying, there is no such book, there is no such Bible study. It takes the power of the Holy Spirit. It takes the power of God in the life of people in order for him, for that person to be able to change, even if they want to, even if they desire to do it with all of their heart, and all of their mind, and all of their spirit. Without God, without the presence of the Lord, they face, I believe, an impossible task. Last week we touched on something that I referred to baggage. We have some people here who are leaving on a trip and they're going to have to carry their baggage. We're not sure how long and how far they may be caused to. When Joyce and I went to visit our kids in Toronto, we had to make a connection. I don't know why, in the midst of COVID, when everybody's wearing masks, they make those connections as far apart as possible. And so, like, gate number 4, and you look up and you're at gate number 162, and you kind of wonder, how long is it going to take to get there? And poor Joyce, I'm having trouble breathing because of the mask and all of those kind of things, and we're trying to get there. But not only do we have to get there, but we have to get there with our baggage as well. So we're carrying all of this stuff and pushing it and getting rid of it. Now, everybody has baggage. Not just the baggage that we take onto an airplane. But there are things that have happened to us in our lives when we were very young or even lately that we don't have any control of. Somehow there are things that we are affected with or hurt by or caused harm by that stays with us. And I refer to that as baggage. There are things that have happened to you that you can't change. Things that have happened to you that you can't share with other people because you're not sure how helpful it might be to have those things shared about us. And so you hold it in to yourself. I think we all carry different amounts and deal with baggage with varying degrees of success. But it's dealing with things that have happened to us in the past and things we can't change. In Joseph's life, it was the family that he was born into. But I want to talk this morning about the next things that happen to us as people that change our way of dealing with the world. And that is that there are things that happen to us because of our baggage. They happen to us in the here and now. They could happen tonight. They could happen tomorrow. They could have happened yesterday. And so this morning I want us to continue to look at the life of Joseph and focus a little bit more on the present of Joseph, the time that he was living in, the interaction and relationship that he has with the world and with his brothers. In a sense, we're dealing with the present. And if I might be so bold, maybe they'll help us to deal with some of the things that come into our life. David was a fellow, when it came to brotherly and fatherly love, he wasn't really sure what all that might mean to him. The family dynamic that he grew up in was very difficult. And he had to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. There was just 11 brothers, and later on a 12th brother, that lived together. They worked together. They did all the things that they did together. And so it was really difficult for anybody to find a way of escaping from that. They were all under the influence of Jacob, whose name later was changed to Israel, under his parenting style. And that style could probably be best called divide and conquer. He grew his family up, he grew his boys up with a lot of insecurity, with a lot of struggles, with a lot of problems. It's almost as if he tried really hard to make their lives uncomfortable. We could maybe guess that some of those roots are even deeper than the present. He was the second born of a pair of twins. His old elder brother, a man named Esau, was only born a few minutes before him. And yet, according to custom and according to law, it meant that Esau had the lion's share of the inheritance. Esau was entitled to take 2/3 of the inheritance, and that last third was to be split amongst any other progeny, about any other sons or daughters that Isaac, his dad, Jacob's dad, would have had. Along the way, we find that Jacob connived and schemed a way to work around this. In fact, what he did was he stole his brother's birthright from him for, we're told, a bowl of stew. His brother despised his own position in the family. It's almost like he said, there's nothing you can do to me that's going to knock me off my pedestal. I'm the oldest son. I have all of those responsibilities and all of those inheritance. There's nothing you can do. And yet Jacob was able to steal those rights from his brother. And not only did he steal his birthright, but he also stole his brother's blessing. In this time when somebody was passing away, his last will and testament would come out in the forms of a blessing. And so he would gather the family together, and they would all come together, and he would tell them how he thought his legacy would be split up amongst them. And you can read about that legacy that Jacob left to to the boys in the scriptures at a later time if you'd like, but it's really very interesting. And so Jacob was able to steal this blessing, this best blessing, from his own brother. We don't change a lot sometimes in our lives. Even when we get to know the Lord and we're filled with His Spirit and all sorts of good things happen, we still carry with us that baggage that we were talking about. And I think the way that Jacob grew up affected the way that he raised his own children, his own boys. Jacob thought that the way you get ahead in life is by stealing, is by cheating, is by forcing yourself, forcing your will upon another, by lying, by taking advantage of people when they're down and out, and looking, and that's the way he looked at his own family of boys. He wasn't a nice guy. He wasn't the guy who sits down with their son like Opie and Sheriff Andy kind of thing, fishing. He's more like the dad that one of the houses on our block had, that everybody on the block knew that this dad was sometimes out of control. And there was lots of yelling and lots of banging and lots of unhappy people coming out of that. By the way, his son became one of the best boxing promoters in the city of Edmonton, basically because he had grown up in a house and that's what he saw all of the time, fighting and anger and frustration. I think that Jacob raised his family in a way that would have been uncomfortable for the boys. His brother got so angry with him, Esau got so angry with him at one point that he threatened to kill him. And Jacob had to run away to a different country in order to keep his own life. We also know some other things about Jacob. We know that he was a mama's boy. He was mom's favorite. Esau was his dad's favorite. And everything that he could do no wrong in the sight of his dad. But Jacob was a mama's boy. Now, take a look at that mama's boy. Now married to 4 different women. One of them has 6 children, another one has 2 children, another one has 2 children, and the woman that he loves has 2 children as well. And can you see the machinations that go on in somebody's mind if they think that somehow Mama's going to solve all the problems? I think in Jacob's mind, that meant that he had to keep his foot on these boys and on this lady just to keep them under control because they may try and steal his favorite sons, Joseph's birthright and blessing from him. You know, his mom was someone who knew how to get what she wanted. And she benefited from the power that she had in that culture to help him. And I think that Jacob was afraid of that. And so he made sure his boys had a disconnect with their moms. That somehow, even though they were attracted to and helpful to their moms, it was he who called all the shots. Now, that kind of abuse of power leads to certain things, and one of the things that it leads to is a potential for angry young men. Do you see that happening here? These are young men who are just not being treated fairly, who are not given love by their dad, who are not able to help their moms. Their moms are crying out to God and to everybody who would hear, oh, that our husband would love us. And by that they meant, oh, that we would have a secure future with our husband Jacob. Oh, that we would know that when he dies, we'd be looked after. But they didn't have that promise. And I think Jacob liked to kind of just put the pressure on little bit by little bit and just say, yeah, you know, because I'm the one who's in control here. A number of years ago, I went to perhaps the best conference that I've ever been to. I've been to hundreds of conferences over the years, but this one had a very special focus on men. And I remember sitting under the teaching, and I got a lot out of those messages. But one of the things that he said continued with me for a long, long time, and I don't think that I would still dispute that it isn't accurate in what it says. But it says that that every man has a vacuum in their life. Every man has an area in their life, and that area should have been filled by their dad. That area should have been filled by somebody showing someone how to be a good boy, how to be a good son, how to be a good worker, how to be a friend of people. There's a lot of men out there who have a hole in their life where their father should have been. And it's causing this world problem after problem after problem. Because what our men, us as men, cry out for is we want to be helpful and secure. We want to be able to show our love freely to others. We want those that we love to be protected. Now, this was not the kind of household that Joseph was born into or lived in. When they see Joseph coming in the middle of nowhere, it's almost their initial reaction. They look up and they see this guy coming with this coat of many colors. He brought a bad report to their dad a while back, and he might do the same thing. And their very first thing that they say about this guy is they say, let's kill him. Now that pretty well tells us how desperate they were. And there's only one voice in the crowd of these 10 men, because Joseph's younger brother, Benjamin, was still at home. There's only one voice in this group of 10 men who starts out by saying, we shouldn't do that. That's a bad thing to get. Now, I don't want to get too psychological, but can you see how in killing Joseph, these 10 men are actually killing their father? They're saying, this is our father's favorite. This is the one our dad loves. We're going to take it from him. We're going to take it from him. Because yesterday at breakfast time, my mom said, Dad doesn't love me. Mom said, we're going to get thrown out on our ear. We're not going to have anything for the future because Jacob's a selfish guy. He's going to keep everything for himself. And somehow I think that these young men wanted to vindicate, wanted to make sure that their mom's value was upheld. And they thought, I'm afraid to kill my dad, but boy, I tell you, I could kill my brother pretty easily. He's smaller and lighter as well. Now, while Reuben came to the defense of Joseph at this point in time, we actually find out that that Reuben had been unfaithful to his father far before this by sleeping with one of his father's concubines, one of his father's wives. In fact, the mother of two of his brothers, Reuben had slept with, and was punished by God and others, was punished so that, but we find him rebelling against his father as well. Reuben lost his birthright. His birthright ends up going to Judah. And it is through Judah that we receive Jesus. Now, more than likely it should have been Reuben through whom we receive Jesus because he was the oldest. But it doesn't work that way. Now, Reuben, of course, had lost his voice in the council of his brothers. He couldn't say to them, oh, no, you guys shouldn't be doing that, because they'd just look at him and say, you shouldn't have done what you did. And to the boys whose mom that was, they were looking for their knife or whatever they might have to do something. And Reuben just tried his best, but didn't have an awful lot of success. And so the brothers come up with a plan. Now, if you're going to make a plan, you don't choose the angriest, most bitter, dumbest people to be part of that plan. Well, that didn't occur to Jacob's boys. They thought, we got a plan. So let's kill him and we'll just throw him down a pit and we'll tell Dad, oh, an animal got him and that's enough for us. What they really weren't thinking of is they were really in a very busy place. The idea here is that the scriptures don't come out and say, but this place is a watering place for the caravans going north and going south. And the dry pit that they throw their brother into is actually a well that didn't produce. They tried to dig a well over here to get some more water to come, but there was no more water. So they ended up with a pit, and they threw their brother down that pit. There were at least two caravans that went past while all of these things were going on. And I think that this is the thought process that was going through some of their minds. If we kill him, they're going to know. They're going to see what happened, and somehow, somewhere, we're going to get told on it. If we sell him into slavery, well, we can do that, but we might not be able to get away with it because he's going to, or if we leave him in a pit, he's going to scream. If we sell him into slavery, well, somebody's going to find out about it, but maybe it'll be too late by then. And so they sell him into slavery. Now, Judah is the one who comes out and says, let's just sell him into slavery. Now, this is the level to which that family had gotten. That the best of the best of the best of their family was a boy who said, well, we shouldn't kill him, we should just sell him into slavery, and we can get 20 shekels of silver, which is about, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of a wage for a day kind of thing, so maybe a month's wages that they sold him into slavery in. By the way, when Jesus was betrayed, he got 30 pieces of silver. I guess that's inflation, and that's all right for us. But in this circumstance, they just get him 20 pieces of silver. They don't sell him to Ishmael because Ishmael is just across the Jordan River to the east of them, and somebody's going to find out. So they sell him to the Midianites, which is where Moses got his wife, and all of those things happened in the Exodus. And they were quite a lot south of where they were. And so they strip Joseph. They take his robe. They kill a goat. They take the robe and they take it and wrap it in the blood. You know how that's good to look. Reuben is unable to fight against his brothers. He's unable to fight against the Ishmaelites. He's unable to fight against the Midianites because the people that he would be fighting with are those who are against him at this point in time. But he kind of coalesces, kind of goes along with what's happening with his brother and with them. And so he agrees that, okay, fine, if we're better, should we let my father grieve or go looking for somebody lost? That's a waste of time. Let's just tell him he's dead and everything will be fine. I like how the brothers managed to get lunch in there as well in the middle of all of these things that are going on. So human, I think. So human is this interaction. Sin leads us nowhere but into deeper sin. Bad actions lead us deeper and deeper into more bad actions, into worse actions. We don't get better at things, we get worse at things. It was the end of February when Russia said, we're not going to attack the Ukraine. Well, then they just went ahead and did it anyways. But we're not going to target civilians, but they went ahead and did it anyways. We're going to let people have grain and feed them, but they didn't. We can let them have some oil and they can keep their homes, but they won't, kind of thing. Actions and actions and actions they just get worse and worse and worse. And for us who know, and most of us know, what happens in a war changes people forever. They do not come out of a warfare with the same state of mind and the same amount of trust as they did going into that warfare. You think PTSD is a joke? It isn't. It's real. And people get scarred and hurt. And not only that, then it leads to torture. It leads to rape. It leads to excesses. It leads to pain and hurt. It just goes on and on and on. That's what happens when people start to follow after their own counsel and not the counsel of God. Now, what's Joseph's response to all of that? There's an awful lot of baggage bound up in this man's life at this point in time. He's a very important person, of course, in this little story. But he hasn't said anything. At least not that's recorded. We don't know if or what he might have spoken to his brothers. Maybe he can assume he said, don't do that, I don't want to die. But we don't know. We're not sure what he said to the Ishmaelite traders or the Midianite traders after he was captured. Did he tell them, hey guys, you got problems, I'm your problem. My dad's going to come after me and get me. And we're not sure of those things as well. What kind of report do you think that Joseph, if he was released, would give to his father now? And I think that the brothers thought, we've come this far, we better go all the way. And his brothers just simply got more angry and madder, and now this. It's important to note that there is a time to speak and a time to be silent. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he spoke, but very, very little. And in fact, when it came to the final accusation, he didn't speak at all. Joseph understands this. He understands that there are times when our speaking just doesn't have the impact that it needs to have. And it's time for us to overcome that baggage and to overcome the situation and understand something, and we'll talk about that next week. May the Lord bless his word to us today.